guys, welcome back to EK TV, and I'm delighted to have Reuben Yap with us, the COO of Zcoin. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Glad to meet you.
Yeah. So, what brings you to Paris? Obviously, the blockchain summit, but what are you hoping to achieve here?
Well, we don't really have much of a presence in Europe because we're mainly based in Asia. So I think it'll be great to sort of reach out to see who are the players, especially in the Europe region and France as well. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So tell us a bit more about Zcoin for our followers that maybe don't know much about what you're doing. What are you guys working on right now? What successes have you had, and what are you hoping to achieve in your long-term vision?
Sure. So we are a privacy cryptocurrency. We've been around since about September 2016, so we're not a new project. We have our own independent privacy protocol that's currently based on Zcoin. So where other type of privacy protocols is more about like mixing coins together or like building decoys, we are about allowing people to destroy their coins and they sort of like stop existing, and then at any time in the future to redeem new ones with no previous transaction history using zero-knowledge proofs. So that's what we are primarily about. Yeah.
Okay, and I understand that something you just told me before we rolled the camera, that you guys were actually involved significantly in a Thailand election vote. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Well, it's more on the Thailand Democrat Party, so it was a party election, and it was selecting their party leader, kind of like similar like, selecting Donald Trump as the leader of the Republican Party. So there were three candidates, and but I mean, just so people understand.
Yeah.
But what it means is that there were actually three candidates, and they wanted to allow any Democrat party to vote for their party leader. Previously, it was just a bunch of bigwigs selecting who should be the next leader, and they said let's open it to the entire Democrat Party membership. And to allow this at a cost-effective way, they wanted to do it through e-voting. But what happened then was that none of the candidates trusted anybody. They didn't even trust the election commission. So they were like, how do I know that once I store the votes, it's not going to be tampered with? And that's kind of where Zcoin's blockchain came in, where all the votes were recorded on the blockchain. And there's nobody can tamper with it once it's stored there. And 127,000 people throughout Thailand voted on our blockchain. So we believe it's actually the first wide-scale political election carried out on the blockchain. Yeah.
I mean, congratulations. I'm super impressed. I really want blockchain elections to be integrated throughout the EU and throughout the world. Why wouldn't you? So obviously that sounds like it was a success. So given that was a success, was that like a trial project? Was the actually Thai, kind of general elections looking at that, thinking if this works, maybe this is something they can roll out, for the whole election?
Well, right now it's a bit sensitive. We're not really sure whether the government actually wants fair and transparent elections. But yeah, I'm not Thai, so I can say that. Yeah. But I do feel that for a wide, nationwide, talking about 70 million people. At that scale, of course, we can solve the scalability issue, but when there's so much at stake, you're talking about nation-level attackers. And I think blockchain is only one component in it, which is the storage of the votes and the verifiability that the vote has not been tampered with. But there are many other elements, for example, from the hardware to the software. How do you verify there's no backdoors inserted? And I think there's some ways to go. Right now, there's only been limited smattering of trials here and there. And I think so far the most promising one would be there's an open source project done by DARPA in the US that's trying to fund for elections. But I don't know if you know about the Swiss vote thing. They were talking about how those zero-knowledge proofs, you could forge it and affect the results. Yeah, so I think the technology has some ways to go before it can be deployed nationwide. But for internal party elections or smaller things, blockchain is a great in-between thing. Yeah.
So you mentioned Zcoin. You're building a privacy protocol. How do you differentiate yourself from then Zcash and Monero?
Yeah, so as I said, Monero is more about the kind of analogy that I would like to use is for example, if I want to let out a fart, and if I'm the only one in the room, then they know it's me, right? But
that's a funny analogy.
Yeah, so Monero, how it does it is they drag 10 other people into the room, and then you fart, and you're like, oh, could be one of these 10 people, right? For zero knowledge proofs similar like Zcash and us, it's kind of like we fart in the room, and then we choose anytime in the future when it's going to smell. So that means your sort of like plausible deniability is not just with the people in the room, but anyone who'd ever let out a fart before in the room. Now, in terms of our differences between Zcash and Zcoin, we are moving towards a system where there's something called no trusted setup, meaning that we don't have to trust people to set up the system, because when you trust the way people to set up the system, there's potential backdoors inside. And they're also using quite experimental cryptography, which is great because it has immense anonymity and immense performance. But for us, we're thinking like, hey, it's really important to use really solid cryptographic building blocks. And on top of that, you want auditability of supply, meaning that you can be sure that coins are not being created out of thin air. And I think that's a real differentiator between us and Zcash.
Okay. So for Zcoin, is there an option to make it like non-private or private? Because I saw recently a report saying like, even though these coins are supposed to be private, like actually most of the transactions are still using the non-private version of the chain.
I think that's a really good, people talk about the privacy on by default, whether that should be the case. And of course, in terms when you're talking about like stuff like Monero, when you're mixing with other people, it's important to have many people doing those transactions. With zero knowledge proofs, it's not as important because your set just keeps on growing as time passes. You're not like mixing people in the rooms. As long as people are using it, that's good enough. However, we do feel that we will be moving towards a privacy on by default, but they should be able to opt out. Like for example, if you want to do like donations, charity, when you want it traceable, they should have that option to do that. But from the end user, it should be private on by default, with the possibility to opt out if you want to do so for any particular situations as well. Yeah.
So you're the COO, right?
That's right.
What do you actually do day to day?
Basically run almost the entire operations. We don't have a CEO. We don't have a CEO. We have a founder. Okay. And that's about...
He doesn't run the business?
Well, he's more like, developing real use cases. Like right now, we're actually hoping to get nationwide adoption of Zcoin in Thailand, where we are plugging into an existing system that's used by the government, which has already 40 million users and 2 million merchants on board. So that system was meant to be like, a global QR code system where you could do credit cards, Alipay, WeChat Pay, and now we found a way to actually allow cryptocurrency payments so that merchants will receive Thai baht and they can pay using Zcoin. So immediately I can spend Zcoin anywhere in Thailand, which accepts this prompt pay system. So that's kind of what he's working on. For us, like, I run like the development, I also make sure that my marketing and my community is so basically what we call in Chinese like one leg kick. One leg kicks and does everything. Yeah.
So you're a busy guy basically. And is your founder Thai?
Yes.
Okay, I was going to wonder why you guys were focusing so much on Thailand, but that makes sense. I think Thailand actually, didn't they in the last maybe 3 to 6 months actually put some legislation through to actually make it quite a blockchain-friendly country?
I think it's moving towards the right direction. Like I think the first step is always regularization of the exchanges, making sure that only the players with the resources and the technical capabilities run these exchanges. So our founder actually owns one of the 3 exchanges currently that has this license, which is why we can do all of this.
Convenient.
Yeah, so that's great. Of course, now they're looking at ICOs, STOs, and all this type of things. I think they're quite at the forefront of things. And Malaysia is also quite interesting. They've recently come up with some draft legislation to regulate ICO, STOs, and digital assets. I'm not sure if it's as progressive, but I think it's all moving towards the right direction to make sure that we don't have another incident like Mt. Gox or Quadriga. There needs to be some regulation to make sure that at least while we need centralized exchanges, there needs to be some forms of control.
And so, we've mentioned Thailand, Malaysia. What kind of market penetration is Zcoin actually seeing in Europe?
Right now, I think market penetration in Europe is like quite low. I think most of our investors actually are from the US, because I think they value privacy a lot. Of course, we have a solid following in Southeast Asia, but we do have a lot of our staff in Europe, and this is a place that we're hoping to penetrate in, especially in the different, like those with different languages, like Spain and like Portugal, where English may not be as prevalent in those countries. Yeah. And I know like France like recently talked about banning privacy coins, so
well, we're here to tell them not to do that.
Yeah.
That's why you're here, really.
I think that's a really interesting thing that regulators have to think about, because first of all, where do you draw the line as to what's a privacy coin?
Yeah.
Like Bitcoin's implementing privacy features, Bitcoin Cash, Ethereum is also looking at privacy features. So if we have privacy features, is it a privacy coin? You know, where do you draw the line? And there are legitimate use cases for privacy. Yeah. And I feel that you know, the government has been talking, like regulators have been talking about it as facilitating money laundering, terrorist funding, but that's a really wrong narrative to have. It's not about hiding something, it's about having the ability to choose what to reveal, right? I mean, like right now, a lot of the stuff, our privacy is just like given because we don't have a choice. But with privacy features, we can choose, oh yeah, I don't want to reveal this to Facebook, I don't want to reveal this to Google. And we have seen time and time again, all these large companies are not the right people to keep our data secure. I mean, how many times have we heard about a Facebook data breach, right? Yeah.
Winds me up, trust me. So go on then, tell us what the legitimate use cases are for privacy transactions, like the general use cases.
I mean, like, for example, right now if I go to a coffee store and I buy a coffee, that person he needs to know is that I paid for the coffee, right? But with blockchain, because you know, all the coins have a permanent record, you could see where it's been. If I believe that blockchain payments are going to be a thing, when I pay someone using coffee, then potentially he can tell what's my net worth, who I've transacted with, which exchanges I use. And that's only like just from one transaction. If I do it repeatedly and these merchants start like forming a consortium to share data, they develop a really detailed profile of who you are. And people always say, oh yeah, I have nothing to hide and whatnot. But it's about having that, you know, ability to choose, because you never know when you're going to be targeted. Like you do something, you know, that the government may not be fond of. We you know, in Europe or US, we assume that governments will not single people out, but that's not true. I think people have to realize that these are fundamental freedoms that we should not allow them to be taken away, and at least have that option there that we want to have private transactions, because cash is private. Yep. So yeah.
So yesterday in the news, I've been asking everyone this, Binance decided to delist Bitcoin SV. What's your view on that whole situation?
Well, first of all, I think people have to differentiate between, well, Binance is a centralized exchange. You know, they are their own business. It's owned by you know, CZ and a couple of other people. Yeah. They can choose what they want to do, right? And that's their choice. I don't know why people are imposing like, oh yeah, in the terms of marketing, they shouldn't do it. It's their business. They can run it how they like. And if there's someone else that wants to support SV, let them have it. That's what the free market is about, right? To say that you have to list everything, and you know, I think that's a bit incredulous. I mean, personally, I don't believe Craig Wright. I don't know why anyone supports him. It's quite an unlikable person and been proven time and time again to be a fraud. But
careful, you guess.
No, I mean, no, well, sure. Yeah, you know, I'm a lawyer. I was a lawyer for 10 years. So bring it on.
Okay, great. And on that point, just to finish the interview, could you tell us one maybe not controversial, or something that you believe within the Bitcoin and crypto community that you hold, like, as you think that's actually going to happen in the next however many years?
I think one thing that I find particularly concerning is Bitcoin maximalism. Like, I mean, of course, I may be biased coming from a altcoin and whatnot, but you know, when Bitcoin is becoming a bit like a religion, that like no deviation is permitted, you know, these are the only ways to do it. I think that's a very dangerous way to look at things, because the technology is still in its infancy. There's so many better ways to do it. It's just that Bitcoin had the sort of like momentum, the first mover advantage, but we shouldn't be just like stagnating, or what we call ossification. We should be looking at all these other altcoins and like, okay, yeah, if it's developing value, like, you know, even my competitor like Zcash, I think they're doing amazing stuff, you know. If no one else, if you're only looking at one thing, I think that's a very dangerous thing to do. I'm not even sure whether blockchain will be the only thing in 20 years' time. There's so many other decentralized ledger technologies, and we have to realize that it's in its infancy, and we should keep our minds open, but still view it objectively as to its pros and cons. So I really am worried when people say Lightning is the only way, you know, like, or 1 terabyte bots are the only way. We have to just explore and find out what works, and we have to keep that open mindset at least while the technology is developing.
Yeah. So where can our followers and viewers find out more about Zcoin?
So Zcoin.io is our website. We of course listed on Binance, BitTrade, Swapy, a lot of the major exchanges. We have a really active Telegram community and forums as well. So drop by, and I'm actually hanging out a lot in the Telegram channel. Yeah.
Cool. All right, Reuben, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
That's EAK TV. Make sure to subscribe below, and we'll see you next time.